Hello, everybody. I'm your host, Zenitsu, and you're listening to the Digi Talks podcast, the show that covers various topics from news to meta developments and everything in between for the fine folks who love the Digimon trading card game. Just as a quick reminder, I do stream this live over on twitch.tv at twitch.tv/Zenitsu, and it also gets uploaded as a YouTube video under the YouTube channel of Zenitsu. So today I'm with my co-host Teddy, and we're going to be talking about our thoughts on the new ban and restriction update. But before we get into that, we did have a couple of events happen over this weekend, or this past weekend, and unfortunately at this time I don't have the metadata and the math to update the current state of the meta, but we do at least know from the two big North American events what did end up winning. So at MomoCon, Hunters did end up winning that, and Top Cut, it was Red Hybrids that ended up winning that event. So Beelzemon isn't the only deck that can top, as we've previously stated, but I do think it is kind of ironic that the other two decks that topped literally are decks number 2 and 3 in terms of the top 5 decks of the format. So what are your thoughts on where the meta currently is, even though we don't have the bigger scope data to look at this time?
Yeah, unfortunately, since we don't have it, it's kind of just like a thoughts, more opinion based, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And I kind of still lean back on my stance where we were before, where I think this meta is quite diverse. You can still do just fine with any of the top, probably 5 or 6 decks. You can still do well as long as you pilot. You get good matchups, and um, as you can see from this thing, Hunters is just really strong for Mo. I mean, it's 1 and 2 basically, like with Beelzemon and that. It can flip flop. I think Beelzemon just seems a little bit more consistent, but Hunters is there, man. When it goes, and there's not much your opponent can realistically do when Hunters decides to pop off. So I 100% could see it winning multiple events and going forward. This is even before Banlist, so there's no shenanigans afoot there where this only mattered because Beelzemon got hit. No, that's not true. So seeing that and then Red Hybrid win while Beelzemon was at full power shows that these decks can compete, and there's no way for you to say that Red Hybrid is bad or Hunters is too slow or bad, because they've proven here that you can win and you can do well. So
I think the thing is we're getting to the point in the meta where usually there's a lot of we already know Beelzemon is the best deck, so people are just trying to figure out how to be able to A, play against it, and B, tech in cards against it. So I would love to see what both of these players are doing in terms of their list. I think Red Hybrids has a little bit more flexibility than Hunters in terms of tech that they could actually run to be able to handle the meta. But I feel like the way Hunters is designed, some people think it's a pretty brain dead deck. I think that's completely false. I think that even though it is a very aggressive deck, it is heavy on resource management and being able to play your tamers, what you're tucking, what you're aggressing with, how you're lining up your inheritables, what you're digivolving into. There's just a lot of very subtle nuance to how to play Hunters and how to play it well, that you can't just say, here is the deck, shuffle it up, and you should be good to go if you have a basic understanding on how to play Digimon. I don't think it is the most brain dead deck ever. Now, a deck that's a little bit more brain dead but still has its own nuance is Red Hybrids. I've played the deck. I did better last regional playing Red Hybrid than I did this regional playing Beelzemon. I am just going to be on the record. I do not enjoy playing Beelzemon. I played him this weekend just because of the ban and restriction list, and it was not fun for both me and my opponent, and I just was not, my heart wasn't in it. I know some people like it. I don't. Red Hybrids is definitely a deck that speaks to me, and I'm glad to see that it was able to top, just because it does have some very fast and explosive setups, and understanding how to get to those setups and gauge your own consistency on how to be able to utilize your cards is still something that red hybrids you have to know and you have to pay attention to, even though the deck is very aggressive, turn sideways, deal big damage with big numbers.
Oh yeah, I mean, I agree your points there. I don't know how anyone could say Hunters is brain dead because the macro management in that deck is absurd. Like the amount of micro decisions you have to make in order to optimally play the deck is quite staggering, and it could be hard for someone that just picks up the deck. You can get a basic understanding if you know, but just because you have that basic understanding doesn't mean you'll pilot the deck effectively, and you'll end up burning yourself out quite quickly if you don't manage your resources correctly. And then Red Hybrid is a little bit less so on that front. Uh, but there are still plenty of plays that require you to set up things in advance rather than and be like both proactive and reactive, but simultaneously. So I don't. I can see where people would say that it's just pure brain dead, but I don't think that's 100% true because there's still thought that goes into a lot of the plays aside from just turning the card sideways, uh, which is usually how you would just go through your plays. But understanding what you have in hand, what you could potentially draw to deal with said thing, whatever things are on the board, how you deal with them, how hard you can hit, so you can push the aggression, is what will make the better red hybrid player over somebody that's just playing is like, oh, I could just play this brain dead deck, swing everything. That just won't. They will lose more often than not if they have that mentality.
Yeah. I definitely learned a lot more of the subtle nuances this weekend and last regionals, playing against Red Hybrid and playing with Red Hybrid. I definitely think it's a very strong deck and definitely one of the better decks. But in terms of like where the meta currently stands, once we get more of the data that is coming out from these past two regionals, we'll get a better grasp on the meta. But as of right now, based on what little we did get, on top of all of the stuff that we did have beforehand, this is definitely looking to be one of the more soured metas of the game. Even though it's cool that there's like still 5 or 6 like actually top performing playable decks, and then there's still like the rogue decks that are able to top. The amount of rogue decks that actually are able to top is severely decreased compared to other formats, even other shorter formats. So like the blue hybrid dominance is obviously the worst meta that we've had as far as like actual data recorded. Blue hybrids had a dominance of about 55% of the top slots, and that was extremely toxic. That's borderline close to tier 0. I would probably say tier 0 is, this is just using Magic the Gathering's numbers. They say tier 0 is like 56 to 58%, and that's when like the emergency ban hammers just needs to be pushed, and the button just needs to be pushed for something to get hit to put it back in line, put and correct the meta. Blue hybrids didn't exactly quite get there, but it was gosh darn close. And for this format, Beelzemon is the majority of top slots. It's not at 50%. It's hovering around like high 30s, low 40s. I'll get more when we actually have more information, but this is definitely a very particularly interesting position for the meta to be. And on the cusp of that, we actually got a kind of surprise out of the blue ban and restriction announcement that kind of helps the format and it kind of doesn't. It definitely shakes things up to where we have to like sit back and reassess things a little bit. And I think that's going to be good, but unfortunately regional season is pretty much over, and we are entering Ultimate Cup season, which follows a completely different rule set. So for the most part, competitive BT12 is pretty much done. So if you want to say what the ban and restrictions are, Teddy, I think that would be a good way to lead off this next part, talking about actually the ban and restriction.
Yeah, I got you right here. So we got 4 cards that were just added on the 26th. So 2 days ago, we got Blossomon, the Green Vegetation Digizorb 3, finally joins its brethren, Argomon, on the list. And then we got this one. I mean, this is probably the most warranted one. The Impmon, this is at least one that's most prevalent to most people's minds. The EX2 Impmon that mills 3 when it's milled from the deck. This one, I mean, self-explanatory. I mean, mills 3, then potentially could mill multiple if it's hit by another mill source. So it's quite absurd how good this card is. So I understand that it got hit, why it got hit. This one I think is the next one, I should say. This one I think is just for future proofing. Then I mean they say it here. Going forward, the Wergurumon promo 008, I believe. Um,
Yes.
that card has been, I mean, it's a little late, but I understand going forward they kind of just want to get rid of this card, which is weird, interesting that they're doing it now and not maybe later on when it might become more prevalent. But they're just saying it's been good here because they put little synopsises down of why they believe it should be there, and they even say, funnily enough, it's not even strong in the current play environment, but it limits future card design, which is hilarious. Um, and I'm assuming they're talking about like Blast Ace and things like that. Going forward with BT 14 leaks and things like that, but that's a different topic. Then the last card, which very surprised this took so long to get to, promo 025 Grand Kuwagamon, the one that Digiburst 2 to get security attack +1. This card, I mean, it's pretty apparent. I mean, you just Digiburst the entire stack, get security +2 to 3, and then just absolutely destroy your opponent with Grandis, and it was just too good. Like, and yeah, right now it's not. It's still very strong. Nothing has changed about the deck, so but it's just not as good in this current meta because of all the security bombs and all the low to the ground decks that just outpace it. But they're doing this for most likely to try to print more future stuff later on. Makes sense. So I agree with this one too. I think every card on this list I agree with. Maybe not for the reasons they put here, but this one in particular I do though, because it's just too much, man. Like a 3 cost Digiburst multiple item would actually be 2 on top of the other. What's that card name? The Kuwagamon or and that's just
Okuamon
yeah,
X Antibody.
Kuwagamon.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
the between the Okuamon X Antibody and Okuamon, you're actually netting memory when you digivolve half the time, and it's just like that's it. Just it feels so quick, and that's part of their description is like, oh, the deck literally can OTK. There's nothing the opponent can do to stop it other than hope their security is good enough, or they lined up a big enough immortal blocker, which not everyone has access to. And yeah, it just blows people out of the water. They also mentioned that for the promo Garurumon, like, I don't see Garurumon or Melga X in its current incarnation as an OTK deck. It has the potential, but most of the time it doesn't actually get there. But
Yeah, it's getting you close,
yeah,
but then
it
doesn't
gets you
actually get
real
there.
close. And like these two cards in particular, they do feel kind of too late. Blossomon also feels kind of like this card is just late to the party in terms of when they could have hit it. Like, I think one of the biggest gripes that players had is all of these cards could have been banned or limited back in what, March, when they banned literally one card. Like, they could have just hit the others if they already knew that this was going to be a problem. Even if the
Yeah,
cards aren't good in the current environment, like, which they obviously have stated in Melga's case.
yeah, I don't quite understand why it's here now. Like, it is just very random out of the blue. First off, it's 2 months from the last ban list, which is very, very fast uh, compared to other times we had to wait for ban lists. So I'm interested. I know they probably won't ever give it to us, but as to the reasoning why this was pushed forward now, unless it's just solely for JP because they're getting new stuff in BT14, and maybe that's why they're doing that.
Yeah, but the weird thing is, the ban list is the same between North America and Japanese, or not really North America, English and Japanese. There we go.
Mm-hmm.
Got to be politically correct here. But the ban list is the same, but the timing is different. Japan gets theirs on June 16th, and North America, we get ours, or sorry, English, we get ours on the 1st
First.
of June. So it's just like, it's not uncommon to see them do it at the first of the next month, but I think like waiting until EX4 to have it be implemented kind of feels like a smarter idea, because like I don't necessarily think these bans were like completely unwarranted or out of the blue. Actually, none of these cards were banned. They were just all limited to one. Um,
Yeah.
but I don't think these were out of the blue considering the Ultimate Cup. They generally use that alternate rule set to be able to act as like a testing ground for future changes. And if we look at the Ultimate Cup's latest color exclusive restrictions, even though, yes, color exclusive does already inherently limit the amount of tech and tools that you could use, they were looking at those decks more specifically. Even though the Garurumon was where Garurumon X, they decided to still end up hitting something from Garurumon, and it ended up being the promo. Bloomlord, they were looking at Hydramon, but they ended up hitting Blossomon. And then Grandis, well, the same card that got hit.
Yeah, the
got
same
hit.
card for that and Imon as well.
Yes. So the Immon was kind of weird considering I would have thought that they would have at least, this is kind of where my rational brain gets put together, is like, oh, Ultimate Cups for June. This is where like releasing the update come EX4 makes sense. So that way they actually have the data on what Beelzemon losing that card actually does to see if anything else needs to be adjusted. But I guess they just decided to rip that band-aid off as quickly as they possibly could. So the Ultimate Cup still shows that they were thinking about these. And they were thinking about them for a while, it seems like. But
Yeah,
I do
they
think they
clearly
could
were on
have.
the radar.
Yeah, I do think that they could have released these a little bit sooner than they did, though. That goes. Bandai's never good with their timing when it comes to these.
No, they never really are.
No, but it's interesting because I was following some of the other Bandai TCGs, and Dragon Ball Super had their ban and restriction announcement at the same time. Dragon Ball Super is a little bit of a different beast. It obviously is a game that has existed longer than Digimon, but it still kind of shows the same type of pattern that Bandai likes to exhibit. And I don't know if we're eventually going to get to that point with more frequent ban and restrictions, but it feels like Dragon Ball Super literally gets one like every set or every other set. So they get cards hit very often. I don't necessarily think Digimon is that problematic. Granted, Dragon Ball erratas cards, and we don't have erratas, like
Yeah,
fundamentally card-changing erratas, and we don't have those, which thank God we don't.
that'd be a
We just,
nightmare.
yeah, we just get the corrected text if it was printed incorrectly from the Japanese version. But yeah, like Dragon Ball Super follows this very same pattern as Digimon, or I guess Digimon follows that same pattern. So I think maybe depending on how the format shakes up, we might see probably late summer, maybe even fall, the next ban and restriction update. And there's a couple of cards I know some people looking at Japanese data probably want hit. And
Marcus, talking to you, Marcus.
Marcus is one of them. At least in my perspective, just because he kind of fundamentally breaks some of the core rules of the game. Free evolution is always a mistake, always. But it is really funny seeing some of the spoilers and then literally printing free evolutions on the cards, and I'm just like, Bandai, why? Like, have you not learned your mistake? Like,
it's funny because you look at cards just right now, like Blossomon getting hit. That's for the exact reason, free evolution. Yet Marcus exists.
Yeah,
It's the same thing. Like, oh god.
Marcus and then the new Agumon, where it's just like, if you have a tie, Digivolve for free
Evolved.
into Greymon. I'm just like, why? Just why? Can you stop, please, Bandai?
Why does Greymon need more support anyway?
Yeah,
God.
let alone free evolutions in a deck that would.
That gains memory for evolving.
Yes, I'm just like, oh, Bandai, can you please stop?
God, man, that's a oh my god, you're making me think about that. Like having the tie from this set BT12 plus that
Yeah, you're actually
just
gaining
you're
tempo
just
for
gaining
digivolving.
memory for just oh my god. this,
Granted,
this
you
is
have
so
to set up
stupid.
the tie yourself, which does cost memory, but if it's early enough in the game, it's actually going to start paying off in dividends.
Like you just steamroll your opponent with so much advantage. Oh god, that's hilarious. I'm like thinking about that now. The plays net available to you. That's absurd.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm looking forward to that.
but with this ban and restriction update, more specifically, they copy and pasted the same paragraph on every single card where this card is limiting future design space, therefore we are also hitting it on top of like the card actually being egregiously stupid. So
Yeah.
as you kind of already mentioned, Itmon uh limits future mill triggers because this card mills excessively, and part of the big problem with Beelzemon is the fact that we don't have a way to interact with their mills, and the fact that off of like a mill 3 they could hit 2 memory gains and like play it Itmon or whatever, and it's just like, okay, now you're actually gaining more value than what you reasonably should out of the card. Granted, you probably would have set one of them up, at least one of them up yourself, to be able to line up the intentional mill trigger, but the RNG additional mill triggers, that's kind of just what pushes Beelzemon above the rest of the decks, is just how extra explosive it can be thanks to all of those mill triggers, which is obviously why Itmon getting hit, not only being a mill trigger, but facilitating even more mill triggers while turboing the trash to put it in a particular state that it needs to be, which is like 10 to 20 cards, depending on the card that you're using. It really just is a card that is allowing the deck to do too much. And then, yeah, Bloomlord, getting into a free Bloomlord, even though you want Argetta most of the time, just is really stupid because, again, the high roll of HPD, which was a card that was limited to 1 because of, again, free evolution. Like, you start to see a recurring pattern where they hit these cards that just do too much, or they allow the deck to do too much, or it just creates unfun play patterns of, like, I'm gonna OTK, I have too much protection, I have free evolution. Like, they're just egregiously stupid cards that really just limit what they could possibly do. And that's kind of the overarching theme behind all of them, is they just hit them all because they want to make more fun cards, and they can't do that with these stupid cards.
Yeah, these cards just make it. Well, they would either one make the other cards going forward obsolete because these are just superior. So why would they? Why would anybody play another level 5 when this does this for like Bloomlord, when this is a free Evo and it suspends your Digimon for you? Like, why would I play another level 5? That makes no sense. If this is there and this card came out BT3, like
I
this
mean,
has
we've
been
we've
there
seen a lot of
forever.
yeah, we've seen a lot of other Digisorption cards just get completely ignored because Blossomon exists. It's just like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna run the main one that sets up my combo, and then I'm gonna run the second best one, which is the one that evos for free.
It's like why would I care what other level 5 is there when this exists? And you could say, well, it doesn't have an inheritable. That doesn't matter. Like getting a free evolution from your level 4 to 5 is such an absurd. Hence why things like Greymon X were limited, because lowering the cost of going into a level 5, turboing into your level 6 is just too good. That's it makes sense. Like this is just logical from just the gameplay perspective. Even going forward, like not even looking at everything else, this just makes sense. And then Hitmon, of course, this we can go forever with this one. This card's just too good for a level 3 card that just you just wanted to get milled. That's way too much value for that one thing. You're plussing from using Iron Mako, just too good. Understandable, and it's the boogeyman that everybody's been complaining about. Both it's here and in Japan, so understand it. Gurumon's just a little too late. I don't know why. I mean, we said it earlier, so it makes sense. And then,
Same thing with the promo, the
yeah,
Grand Kawagamon. It just enabling OTKs, like OTK strategies will always be viable in my perspective as long as they are either A, fast enough, and B, consistent enough. And
yeah.
Grandis definitely can hit both of those marks very easily compared to all of the others. I think like part of the thing with the current meta on why OTK decks aren't doing as well is partially because of security control still being a thing and doing well. So you still have to worry about certain decks' security threats. Not all decks have good security threats, but some of them do. And then I think like the amount of people playing Machine Dramon might just be a big enough deterrent because, oh, Grandis
They can't
can't
deal with it.
OTK it because if they have their big body, they just redirect. It doesn't die, so you don't get piercing. So it's like, oh, I could just effectively turn off your whole strategy, still have my body to be able to then crack back and kill your dude, and then you're just left without your combo.
I think also the decks currently, they're just so fast. Like they're low to the ground. A lot of the decks are just go early, kill you quite fast, and this deck needs time to set up. So a lot of the decks can just not give it time to set up and then just win before it even gets a chance to actually do what it wants to do.
And Melga's big counter in the format obviously is still Machine Dramon, but a War Greymon or not, yeah, a War Greymon
Yeah,
or Black War Greymon deck, like they could
shuts
just
that
sit
deck
on a level
down
5
so bad.
blocker and then just wall you out of the game. So it's just like, oh,
I
that
lose
feels
because he
sad.
got into a level 5.
Yes, because their level 5 most likely will have
uh,
protection. It'll most likely be bigger than your level 5, so it'll start
yep,
eating at your protections, and then you can't get rid of their Digimon. It's just like it just
that
feels
is
so bad.
hilarious. That is hilarious. And then if it does survive, the next turn he just raids into your thing. And then,
Well, that's
God.
if you lose all of your protections trying to swing over their thing. Black War Greymon has a little bit of an easier time just because he has a
Yeah,
redirect with Black War
redirect.
Greymon X, so he has more blocking defensive capabilities. But the fact that like you could still restand with the new War Greymon just again still compounds the fact that it is a hard matchup, and War Greymon and Black War Greymon is one of the better decks of the meta. So it
Oh
only
yeah.
makes sense that Where Gurumon is in check because of that card or
Oh
that
yeah.
deck.
And it'll be that way. This deck, I mean, now even more so now, with Where Gurumon X getting hit, or not X, promo Where Gurumon getting hit. So we'll see. I think it'll just fade into irrelevancy for a little bit, and then when we get this new stuff in BT14, maybe it'll rise back up for a bit. But we'll see.
I mean, the
We will.
BT14 stuff is purple, so
Yeah, but it
uh,
can still be used with the blue.
yeah, fair enough. Just because they do have name-based evolution conditions on top of color-based ones, so
Mm-hmm.
but it's not like we're left without no substitutes. I know the big thing that scares a lot of
Yeah,
people is like, oh my god, my deck got hit. What can I do? How can I continue the game with
you
my
don't.
main card getting hit or an important card? We still have plenty of substitutions for all of these, and thankfully there's actually enough substitutions where I don't necessarily think the decision is super hard. So with Blossomon,
Yep.
the easiest replacement is going to be Cherrymon.
Cherry. Yep.
You already wanted to run the card just because it's the defensive backbone next to Hydra, so now you have an excuse to play more. Even if you don't want Cherrymon, Pistmon is still surprisingly
Just
enough
fine.
a vegetation with Digisorption to Evo for 1. It actually has an inheritable that buffs your Digimon, so it makes your Digimon actually harder to kill. Like I'm surprised people weren't even
Yeah,
looking at this.
all turns
Yeah,
too.
like I'm surprised. And then doesn't he have another ability on his like uh just native to him?
Yeah, this one.
Oh no, it is just Digisorption. So it's just
Yeah,
Digisorption with
Digizorb
a
too,
DP boost inheritable.
and that's
But
also for each other suspended Digimon. So he's massive. Basically makes your Hydra blue massive.
Right, and combine that with Cherry. Like, I'm surprised the card was like just hard slept on, but I guess that's partially the reason
That's the
why
power
Blossom
of
got
Blossom.
hit. Yeah, like Digivolving for 0 just makes a good inheritable completely irrelevant.
Yeah,
Um, and then
hilarious.
yeah, and then something if you want to take a more offensive stance, you even have Entomon from EX3 as well. That
Yeah,
card just lets you be more aggressive because he only works better if you actually have a field. Um, so he's a little bit harder to use, but the fact that like you could just digivolve up into him and then unsuspend the Digimon, swing, and then now your Digimon got extra attack in, and then you could go into Bloomlord afterward. Just adds a little bit of extra push. I think Entomon is going to be the least likely one to get used. Most people are just going to use Cherrymon or Pistmon. Because I think the other vegetation and fairy level 5s, they're just too slow. Like
I
you
know
have
some people were talking about EX1 Lilymon just so you can get an extra, just a bit more aggression. But the 3 cost Evo is a bit much.
yeah.
But I know people were talking about replacing it.
I mean,
I
you have
had
to
some.
suspend your opponent's Digimon to gain benefit off of it, which is
You can
like,
do that pretty easy in the
uh,
deck.
yeah, you have the Pamumon that you could up the quantity to do that. So that would be like your main card to sit on the field. Suspend your Digimon to suspend the opponent's Digimon. Have Lilymon give you the security attack plus. Like, I could see the line. I don't think it's that great. It's probably just as clunky as Entomon, where it
Yeah,
can work, but I don't think it's the best pick.
yeah. It'll probably just end up. Most people just default to Cherry, just because makes the most sense.
Right. If you want to go over some of the Itmon replacements, that's another really easy one, and you do have a couple of other
Yeah,
picks for Itmon.
we do have. I think the big two for me at least. I mean, obvious choice is just the BT2 Impmon. The set effectively does the same thing, but you can't control when it dies. You just swing it in and it dies, and then it'll do the same exact thing, essentially trash 3. Just won't steamroll into multiple trash 3s. But it's the same thing for the most part. And then you have the security promo Impmon that we just got from this set. I've been teetering, testing through them. I like both. I think I'm still going to lean towards the BT2 one just because it's just more consistent and it provides aggression. Um, the high roll of you hitting it in security, the security Impmon, it's fine. Like when it does go off, but sometimes you'll get a hit, and there won't be an Impmon in your trash, and then you're just like, well, that sucks. So it's just a waste. You do get the level 3 back to your hand, which is fine, but um, I think most people will just default to the BT2 Impmon just because it's just superior. You do have the BT6 Impmon. I don't think people will use that. Um, just because you don't really need to get cards. You have already ways to get cards back to your hand via Impmon X / Rivals Barrage. So you really don't need another target to do that, but you could. I could see some people justifying the reasoning to do it. I think you just want more ways to mill your deck out, or at least put aggression up. So I think most people are going to default to the promo security Impmon and then the BT2 Impmon.
Yeah, and because like you could also think about teching in like some anti-meta floodgates, but I think like you do have the opportunity to start experimenting with some other stuff. Like if you're going to be running the BT2 Intmon, maybe you could run an option to help try to delete your Digimon. This would also help trigger your Balmons. So it gives you more opportunity
Yeah,
to run various other tech as well. So
calling, yeah,
yes,
calling to force it.
so
Mm.
there's or death not death
Yeah,
stinger,
Deathclaw.
death claw. So like there's other stuff that you can use. You just have to go in knowing that the deck doesn't have as explosively stupid turns as it once was, which again is kind of the point, especially if the deck is already literally the best deck by a very wide margin. And then as far as the Garurumon promo, yes, it does kind of suck. It does kind of like kneecap the deck, and it loses a lot of damage, but we still have something at least. I think the most
Starter
popular,
deck.
Yeah, I think the most popular card people are going to swap to is going to be the promo Sagittarius mode, just because you get that protection inheritable that's on your Garurumon X, and then it's still counted as a Were Garurumon. So you could still like Digivolve him on top of himself and then go into an X. So like it's not bad. Obviously, it doesn't have the damage anymore, but you still have some plays. And then another sleeper card that wasn't being used just because there was literally no reason to run it until now was the EX1 Were Garurumon, where you just Digivolve up into him and you draw a card. That is pretty good. Drawing helps with the consistency, make sure you can see all of your parts and pieces. And then he even has a when attacking ability that if you just have 8 or more cards in your hand, you get a gain of memory. So the deck already likes to try to attack and multi-attack. It is once per turn, but the fact that you could use that to try to gain tempo and gain momentum for the lack of damage might help get you into some particularly decent situations that the deck didn't normally have access to before, just because, again, the card was limiting what we would want to play and what we were playing with the promo Were Garurumon. I think like you could still technically run, if you're just looking for the damage, the starter deck Were Garurumon. I don't like that card. I think the Security Tech Plus is too conditional, and it cannibalizes the strategy of the deck for you to want to do like this sub source stripping theme. And I've tested that, and it's not good in Garurumon. He just doesn't have the tools to make it really good. So I don't think that is going to be a good substitute if you're looking for that.
No, I don't. I don't think so. I mean, this one's pretty hard. I won't lie. I think you're right on the money where most people just default to using Sagittarius, just because another layer of protection never hurts, and it's fine. Like it's good enough.
You could even run
Especially it
both.
having the
Yeah,
you could
can
also
even,
yeah.
because Sagittarius can Digivolve on top of Were Garurumon from
So you could
EX1.
just run it.
Yeah,
So
so
it doesn't.
there's stuff to play around with. I definitely think this.
It will be inferior.
Oh,
But
100%. It loses a lot of its viability because of that hit.
so I think I agree with you there. There's options, not great ones, but there's options. But there will be more coming later, so it's fine. I think you guys just put it down for a little bit. Maybe if you want to try it out for fun, try it out, see what you find that you like between them. There's plenty of Were Garurumon options, so that you can choose from. But I think it'll be just a side for fun type thing for a little while until the new starter decks come out and BT14 more support comes out.
Yeah, and then Grandis is in probably a lot worse
Same
of a
boat.
position.
The same boat. It's way worse.
Uh,
There's not a good target for that card.
So there's only 2 viable Grand Kawagamon replacements. One we literally just got with BT12. The when Digivolving to suspend an opponent's Digimon and then attack into an opponent's Digimon right away. That's pretty good, especially if you combo that with the X antibody option. So again, you're going to have to shift the deck away from some of the Digiburst, and maybe now, as a result, you could run and lean a little bit more
lines.
into some of the X antibody stuff. Just because Cool Boy, for whatever reason, didn't get limited. I think that card's still kind of really good, but it's definitely showing its age on its viability, just because not every deck needs or wants the X antibody tech and tools, as we're seeing with a lot of people hopping off of the X tech with Gallantmon, just as an example.
Yeah.
But the BT12 Grand Kawagamon still kind of plays into a more control side of the deck, and I think the deck is going to shift from OTK to control with some halfway decent damage, just because the secondary effect also is still really good on tempo, where if you're just using the card as the card and you're not digivolving right away with X antibody into the promo, during your turn once per turn, when an opponent's Digimon becomes suspended, which actually you just did because of your when Digivolving ability to suspend something, you get a gain of memory. So it's still tempo efficient. So I think like that's probably going to be your best Grand Kuwagamon. He does Evo for 4 and not 3, but I think because of the memory gain, it basically effectively costs 3 to Evo. So economy wise, it's still the same for the most part. And then your only other Grand Kuwagamon option is Starter Deck 9 Grand Kuwagamon, where he just
Yeah.
gives himself 4,000 DP and has Security Tech plus 1 native. So I guess like this one is kind of good. He natively costs 3, and if you don't see your Grandis, then this one can still apply a decent amount of pressure. So it's not like it's bad, it's just obviously not as good as just giving the Digimon Security Tech plus and carrying it over.
Yeah, exactly. It's okay. I don't think we have good options for it right now. Like they're fine, and
I'm okay with
they
never seeing the deck.
I can agree. I think well I think people are gonna have to shift their mindset and focus more on control rather than just straight up kill you with the deck now.
Yeah,
Um,
we saw it work in the old Ultimate Cups. There was like a
yeah,
Grandis or two that topped.
it's fine. It can definitely do its job and it can still work just fine. People were using Hercules, Kauteri X, and things like that with it as like a secondary type thing. So I think it's fine.
Yeah, I
Um,
think they also kind of just wanted to hit that card because of the insectoid support that might be coming out with BT14 in Japan. Just because we already know one of the big themes is adventure, like the 90s adventure, way back OG. And one of the tamers, Izzy, has a Digimon Tentamon that is an insectoid. So he's getting some support. So it kind of makes sense that they would want to do something about Grandis, considering feeding that deck with more insect support might just make the OTK even more consistent or harder to stop.
yeah, I think you're probably on the money there. I think most of these decisions were made with that in mind, coming up just because of BT14 support. Hence why they say things like this card's limiting future card design, and they want to do it. Maybe that's why they did it at this time frame, um, which is still a little weird, but
I
I,
mean,
I
it makes sense in Japan.
yeah, I think you are correct there. It makes sense in the sense of they're about to get a new set, so maybe it doesn't really matter that much for us, besides of course the Impmon and things like that. But like, it matters more for them because they're about to get a new massive wave of support.
Yes. Although the thing that still kind of surprises me is the fact that we only have one card that's actually banned, and that's Mega Digimon Fusion. I think for where the state of the game is, having the cards be limited to one, I think is fine, but I think some of those cards probably should be in consideration to get just straight up banned. I don't think a lot of them need to be, but like seeing that one off high roll potential still kind of just feels bad when you see it. I think like the biggest card that I definitely would want to see just straight up banned,
HPD.
yes, is HPD or Hidden Potential Discovered. Like if Mega Digimon Fusion is banned, why is HPD not banned? Is like the bigger question in my head, especially now with mono green level 7s, on
Yeah,
top of the fact that you could use that on any level.
Corpsmon.
Yes, and you have a secondary sub deck that fits into plants, fairies, and vegetations with Rosemon that also cares about suspending your own stuff. So like that seems to be like the downside of the card is actually not a downside, and we already see it with Bloomlord that like, oh, I'm going to HPD Digivolve for 0, gain 5 to 6 memory. Like it's just actually absurdly stupid. And like, yes, it's a one of. It shouldn't happen very often, but with the amount of card draw and consistency your average deck has, you still can see those one ofs more than you
Yeah,
probably want to admit.
in a full match, like a full set, it's very likely you see it in one of those three games.
Right, and if you just high roll your way to victory because of that, it still puts a very feels bad moment in like the taste of the player's mouth that faced against it. So I think like we could do with a little bit more bans. There's not a whole lot of other cards that I would want banned. Most of them are kind of just actually options. Just because options just are generic tech They're just good for a lot of decks, and I think options just do a little bit more than Digimon when they're used in specific decks. So like another card that I actually kind of want banned. This is just more from like a design fundamental oopsie on how they wrote the card is Calling of the Darkness. Like it doesn't seem like it's that bad of a card, but pay 1 to sacrifice your own Digimon. If you have a Digimon
I
to
was like,
basically draw 2 is still like it's not even draw 2. It's better than draw 2 because you're just getting
first time.
back cards that you lost. Which could be very, very powerful cards that you could use like Tech 1-ofs to then use again. So the recyclability on it, on top of the fact that we have ways to recycle the card itself, just already makes it a really, really insane card for a lot of purple decks to use. And again, the big confusion with the card when it first released is, do I have to have that Digimon to gain the 2 cards back? The answer is no.
No.
And I think that's the dumb part because, like, the cost should be associated with deleting the Digimon to get the cards back, but it's not because of the way the card is written. So I think that card is just a mistake and it just needs to be wiped clean.
So either they get rid of it completely or they errata it, which clearly they're not going to because they haven't done it yet. So if they don't want to errata it, then I think it just needs to go because there's no point in it existing.
Right, and it's only going to get better as time goes on, which is why they limited it. It's like, oh, I could use this to grab my Death X back because that's a purple Digimon.
They just have to be more fearful with like making like higher level cards with on deletion effects because then you could do things like Merva looping and things like that, but on a better scale. Merva is like even when it gets off, it goes off and it goes crazy. So imagine if we go forward in time with better cards that do on deletion. Now with that card available to you, you just turn it, and it's something that you can loop because there are cards like Dracmon that add it back. So there's really, I don't know, the whole point of it when they first said it was that they didn't like the idea of the card being able to be looped over and over, but it doesn't change with it being at 1. You still can loop it over and over. So
right, 1 is already too much, especially in Purple's case where having access at your trash is basically just an extra resource zone that other decks don't have access to.
here's a perfect example. Jay Stewart in the chat telling us when calling is paired with Jupitermon and Avenged Kidmon and creates an infinite loop that can prevent deck out. Exactly that reason. Things like that shouldn't exist. It just shouldn't. And that was their reasoning before for limiting it to 1. But most decks back then only used it at 1 anyway. And most decks still now, because they're forced to, but they weren't using more than 1 because they could just loop it back into their hand. So it made no difference.
As long as they see the 1, it doesn't matter. And that's kind of why, like, certain purple decks could be somewhat greedy with a lot of their ratios, is because of that reason. Like, I don't need to see more than 1 of this card because just having 1 means that I have access at it indefinitely because I could pull it out of my trash. Or even just throw it back into my deck, remill it, or do whatever. Like, it just because it hits the trash doesn't mean it's gone, it's out, and it's done. Especially for purple.
Oh yeah, the purple's the ultimate advocate for my trash is my hand, basically.
Yeah, which is why like I kind of want them to start actually banning certain cards. Like limiting, like I already said, limiting to 1 is fine for certain decks. It's just like, okay, yeah, sure. There's the high roll, and even then sometimes the high roll isn't actually an explosive high roll, but on a lot of these options they kind of are. Just because like more decks can use them, obviously.
Without a doubt, I 100% agree with you there. I think Banna needs to be more willing to just ban outright, like, because I don't see the reasoning why they're put to 1. Like, what difference? I mean, it just means that now they have a chance to high roll, and then because they high roll, they win. Like that to me makes like bad. That makes you feel even worse than it is right now. Like with it, like for example, the Wergurumon promo. Right now, you're like, well, it's 4 of, so it's very likely he sees it with the amount of draw power and search that he has. But with it at 1, that means if you see him hit it, you're like, well, you've really hit the 1 off. In the 40 or the 50 card deck, he hit a 1 off, technically 45, because he draws his or security, but that's pretty absurd. And then now it feels even worse because they hit the 1 off, and that's how I feel when I see um, hidden potential. That is like the worst feeling ever when you're playing against them and they drop hidden potential, and you're just like, really, you really saw the 1 in 45? Come on, man. It feels pretty bad. So I think they need to be more willing and open to hitting cards. One, because, like, for example, hidden potential, they literally say it limits card design, and it does. It's a reason why so many level 6s were designed with 5 memory cost in mind, in green, which is why they basically killed the color over time. And they had to make such extreme effects like Hydramon and Bloom Lord in order to compensate for the cost.
Well, they also compensate their own costs because they both have ways of gaining memory. So like
Exactly.
that's a lot of the give and take of like Digimon's current design is like cards have like even though they have a printed cost, this just goes to Bandai design in general. Even though they have a printed cost, that's not their actual cost. So their actual cost is when everything is said and done, what is your average expected outcome on what you actually paid for the card? Bloomlord, the expected cost is actually 2. You need borderline 2 memory to off of a clear field and an Agitar and Raising in order to not pass turn. So that is his expected cost. So it's not like he can't be explosive with more things on the field. Obviously he could, because the more things you have on your fields, the better his memory generation becomes. But going from nothing to that on the base design levels of play, he effectively costs 2. Hydra costs a little bit different because his actually fluctuates, but he's at least supposed to be a 4 or a 3. So he's again kind of weird because he also
Yeah.
triggers during the opponent's field. But a lot of Digimon cards, like, they have that expected cost, and when things go above and beyond and cost less than that expected cost, that's usually when Bandai at least takes note and starts looking at the card or cards in question. When it comes to like their tempo-ness. But obviously, sometimes they don't for whatever reason, and then they're just like, "Oopsies, we made the same mistake again for the 16th time," and then it just gets really annoying because it's just like, "Look, Bandai, did you not learn your lesson the other 16 times? Like, come on." And it's the same patterns with a lot of their other ban and restriction cards. It's just like, oh, this card enables an OTK, so we're gonna get rid of Doru Greymon. It's just like, and the protection also makes it insane. A card doing too much. Like, it's literally the same pattern over and over again. And I think they just need to dial some of the abilities back so that way they don't make the same mistake again. But that based on their pattern, they're obviously going to be making the same mistake again, unfortunately.
I was like, yeah.
Yeah,
I think,
Savior Huckmon is another card that it does too much. The card would actually be insane if it was unlimited. Yes, it would make Jessamon actually playable in this format, but it's one of those situations where like the card it's not fun. Just because it is doing too much.
like, it evolves, plays a Sistermon, which then automatically turns on all its plays. Then, if it's under an inheritable, now you swing twice with a Digimon that can potentially swing 2 to 3 checks. Come on, like, it's just too much. Like, just too much. Hence, it's the exact same thing that what's his name? Both Hot Bloom Lord and oh god, Grandis. The exact same thing they do. Swings 2 to 3 checks, unsuspend, swing another 2 to 3 checks. So it's like, that's, no one wants to deal with that. That's not fun. That's not fun interactive gameplay. Like,
Although War
no
Greymon
one,
right now is doing just exactly
exactly
that.
that same thing. And that's why, like, that's another thing I wanted to bring up. Funnily enough, like,
No, so like that one of the cards I thought that they would have probably hit by now would be
security Greymon.
yeah, yes, security attack +1 starter deck Greymon 1. Like, I am
No
actually
clue why that
surprised
hasn't
they
been touched.
haven't.
It's hilarious that it hasn't been touched. their idea for these a lot of the times is to limit some OTK decks. Like that's literally what this is for. This specific ban list, like they hit 3 strong OTK decks.
I think that's why
So
they're shifting Agumon to be more black than red, because right now he's obviously more red than black, just because black doesn't have the tech and tools to be better than red, especially since red has literally the easy damage to just rip everything apart. So maybe that's like their reasoning to be shifting more towards black. But as long as that card's a card, it's just going to be one of the best level fours for not only just any red deck that has an incomplete package, but any red Greymon based deck that can utilize that.
yeah, exactly. So until they either one hit it, which I don't know if they will, but
I was
it
hoping
just
they would.
it makes sense to me because it's a flexible. It's not limited. It's just flat out security +1. Any red deck can use this, or if you're playing Blue Flare can use it.
Yeah, like
Um,
we've already proven that we could break a card's design in half and use it in unexpected ways.
so it's like if that was the idea, and and also using Bandai's wording, it has been a problem, not necessarily a problematic card. At least some people won't view it as a problematic card, but they'll say things like, "This card has been used in the play environment for longer than we expected." The card has been used since the beginning of the game, like in every red deck almost.
Yeah,
So
I think that card. Anyone who has played Dragon Ball Super will probably understand this one. That card will basically be the equivalent of Champa or Sensu Bean, where those cards were literally a staple established card from like literally from the beginning of the game, set one. And then they just recently hit it within their like the last year of bans and limitations. So I think it's gonna end up being one of those types of situations. Although it's likely that card might not even see any kind of ban or limitation depending on where their designs are at.
yeah, I honestly don't think it ever does get touched, but I just think it's funny that they're hitting these cards, but then a card that facilitates the same exact thing is going to basically skirt by untouched.
But it'll be interesting to see when we get the next ban and restricted update. Like I said, my prediction is going to be towards the end of summer, early or mid fall. That's probably when I would think that they would do it next. Because before, we went from once a year to twice a year to now 3+ times a year, so I have no idea exactly when, but based on the increase in frequencies and when they've done it in the past, to me that just seems like the logical choice on when they're going to look at hitting something else. And I don't outside of Marcus, I honestly don't know what they would possibly hit. When do you think they're gonna hit cards next, and what would your number one pick be?
Oh man, that's pretty hard. Because right now I feel like we're in a pretty decent spot in terms of the meta. There's not a lot of cards that I look at and I'm like, wow, that really should just go away. Um,
Are you sure? You could always look at Beelzemon.
I mean, I guess Beelzemon X, but that'd be the only thing I would be like, yeah, that should probably go. But other than that, I think I'm fine with just about everything Beelzemon does. But the thing with Beelzemon X, if they limit it, that's fine. They just
I mean, that's their
like
big payout card. A lot of people argue that's like their big payout card. You hit that, and the deck loses a lot of its competitive integrity. And I don't necessarily think that's true because you have the
thing is
starter
a
deck
lot of them
one.
only use two.
Well,
So
like we just said earlier, one sometimes is already too much.
that's why I'm saying, like in this specific scenario with that back card Beelzemon X, like you only need to see one, and you mill through your entire deck. All it has to do is hit the trash one time, and then you're good. It will be there for you to use whenever you want. So like it being at one doesn't do anything because you can go through most of the deck. Yes, you just won't see it as superiorly often, but most decks are running it at 2 anyways. So they don't see it often anyway, but they still see it every game because 2 to 3 turns, they mill their entire deck. So maybe with this, it won't feel as bad with the Impmon getting hit. Maybe it won't feel as bad because they're not going to be able to turbo mill as fast anymore. Um, Not without a bit more effort, I should say, to do so. So maybe it won't feel as bad, but I think that would be still the card I'd want to hit more than anything in that deck, just because I feel like it's just not fair. Like trashing multiple security for no cost for one, like that's too good.
It also still has other win
And on
conditions.
deletion
Oh my
and
god, I lost to that on delete effect. I'm just like,
like
oh crap.
nobody thinks about that effect. They only focus on that, but that on deletion matters so much, and it's just it is just a lame card to see. Like once you see it, you're like, damn. Well, I either have to kill them or pray they never get a line
Yeah,
because
and the deck still has other win conditions with the blast modes, so
exactly.
I can see the argument for that. Marcus for me is just because I hate
Yeah.
free evolution, and that card is literally single handedly gonna make
Yeah.
Greymon absolutely like Rise Greymon or Shine Greymon absolutely stupid, especially with the blast mode level sevens.
I'm so 50-50 with it. Like I understand why it should get hit, 1,000%, and I, for the most part, agree with it because it's absurd. Like it activates all the inheritable effects. It does it gives you the free evos, gives you advantage depending on what you're evolving into, or just straight up removal. Like it does basically everything.
And it's a card that can
Get extra
attack.
memory, and while simultaneously, like you say, generate aggression. But the only thing about it getting hit is that kills the deck.
I mean,
Like
they
I
have
think
the
it
other Marcus.
murders the deck because the new Marcus does come out, but that doesn't it. It's good. It's definitely very good. That 5 cost Marcus is very very good. Um, but that slows the deck down so much. Like, and the reason that Marcus is or the deck is even anywhere near good is is for that one card. Literally, that one card is the reason the deck is good. I think if it gets hit, I almost want to say I don't think it fades, and I think it'll still be a good deck, but I don't think it'll be anywhere near as good as what it is right now. Like it will fall a lot because Marcus is just such a powerhouse, and the cards themselves, like, I mean, if you look at the base value of these cards, like they don't do that much. Like honestly, like you play your Marcus out, that's like I'm looking at this. This one plays just a Marcus. This one plays a Marcus as well. This one gives you memory back for having said Marcus or a yellow or red tamer on the board. This one is the same, just plays. This one gives memory. This one turns Marcus into a blocker, uh, and turns him into a Digimon, a 3K blocker. So it's like they all bank on Marcus. So the reason why the deck is not good now, even though that Marcus is available right now, is because they don't have access to the second Marcus, which gives you one, it's a memory setter, and then two, it gives you more consistency with hitting the Marcus because that's where all your effects happen once Marcus comes onto the board. So
I get it. Like, but
I'm
that's just
50-50 with it.
yeah. Like, we have to. This is where like we kind of have to experiment with ourselves in that format on a larger scale to really get a gauge and feel for how the deck is going to be ran, how the environment is going to be, especially with the current changes. Just because now maybe in our format, Beelzemon isn't going to be as prevalent or dominant. I think it's still going to be a very good deck, but that's for the future to tell us how things are going to end up playing out. But that's just my
Oh
prediction
yeah.
and my thought. When do you think the second part of that question? When do you think the next update will be?
I'm not gonna lie. This is really. one of those questions where it's kind of hard because I mean they just blasted us out of nowhere with this list.
They really did.
Like, so it's like what I don't know. I mean, I'm gonna make the assumption that you said it a little earlier, and I kind of agree with this. Like late, like early fall, maybe in like the middle of fall, around that ballpark, we get another one, and then that'll give us time to settle into this next set coming up, and give us some time to play with those cards and see how the meta differs or maybe stays the same from JP. Who knows? We know for the most part we do differ quite a bit a lot of the times, but um, so I'm gonna lean towards around that ballpark, like late fall, middle to late fall, and that's a good amount of time for us. That gives us a few months. We're gonna get EX4, and then immediately following we get, of course, BT13. When is BT13?
BT13's in July. And thank
Oh yeah,
God,
so we
because
got time. So
yeah, because thank God, because EX4, I'm not necessarily super looking forward to, just because I think it's just going to be BT12 2.0. We've already mentioned this before in previous episodes that we don't necessarily think much, like there's some competitive stuff to come from it, but it really just needs some more stuff to make whatever we're getting more competitive. So it's going to shake things up a little bit, but not anything like super drastically like this is the shake up
yeah,
like a standardized BT set does.
yeah, exactly. So I agree there. We're kind of this will be a pretty chill set coming up. BT or EX4. I don't think much is going to change. If
Actually,
not,
is there going to be any regionals for EX4? I don't even know.
uh, I don't think so.
Because I
Let
know
me
the
check.
next set of regionals is in July. So we might get some that might be like split or just on the cusp of
April,
BT13.
June. Oh, actually, yeah, we will.
Yeah, and then
June.
for Gen Con, it should be BT13
Oh
by
wait,
that
what am I
point.
talking about? I'm signed up for June. June regional. Uh, so the March, April,
No,
May,
they're
June.
July regionals because June is Ultimate Cups.
This is this not? What is this? Am I looking at this? This is 2023 June. Oh wait,
They
no,
say
you're right.
May June because
Yeah,
certain
yeah, they're all in the months. They're all in the
yeah,
months. Yeah, in the same months. Yeah, I did sign up for uh this regionals coming up, so
yeah.
I knew that. And then I did also sign up for these Ultimate Cups as well. So
I'm refusing to play in the Ultimate Cups because I personally don't like them. But I definitely will be interested to hear your experience with this wave of Ultimate Cups because that's the next big thing on the horizon in terms of like the meta. So hopefully by next week we should have all of the BT12 data, or at least the vast majority of it, so we could kind of go over competitive. I'm just going to label it competitive BT12, and then Ultimate Cup BT12. So that's how I'm mentally going to divide
yeah,
the formats. So that should be pretty interesting. And then obviously with Ultimate Cups next week, we probably should also start talking about Ultimate Cups and what we think is going to be good, because it's definitely a different format, and it'll definitely be interesting to see what happens, especially since all of these limitations will also affect Ultimate Cups now.
yeah, a lot of stuff just got hit. So this should be interesting to see. I mean, two things from Bloom got hit. Like this will be interesting to look at this and dive a little deeper into it.
Yep. But I want to thank everyone for listening to this episode. I appreciate every single one of you. If you enjoyed this episode and you want to help support the podcast, please make sure to share it on social media with others or post about it on various social media platforms, and leave a review and a rating. That always helps, so that way we could get fed into the Lord algorithm. On top of the fact that if you want to follow or subscribe to the podcast, that always helps too, depending on the platform. I know following and subscribing means different things, but I want to thank everyone again for listening, and we will see you in the next episode.